Hi guys, this is Chris Dovach, Solutions Consultant in Northeastern Florida for Tobii Dynabox. And in this video, we're going to cover how to assemble and adjust the tension for a Vario floating arm mount. So this is a new mounting system that we've had out for a couple months now, but it has become very, very popular due to ease of use for the family members and the caregivers to adjust an I-Series device for their user. So when the device shows up, when the mounting system shows up, it's going to be in this black bag. So please feel free to open that up, take out all the parts out of the wrapping, get the tools, and get everything kind of laid out in front of you. There are some built-in instructions, but if you need a little more help, that's why I'm making this video. So the first thing we're going to do is take the base out. And you'll see that the base itself comes folded up. So if I move my parts out of the way, the easiest thing to do is make sure that both of these black wing nuts are loosened up all the way. You'll see that this is spring-loaded, so if the springs don't automatically engage and push it up, just give it a little tap and it'll release the legs. So from here, we loosen one leg and swing the other one around so that we have a nice U-shaped base. Okay? Then we can come back through and we can tighten up these wing nuts all the way down. Okay, so now we need to determine a couple things. Where is the user going to be positioned when they're using this particular mount? So we can take these two bolts out here and make this base much wider if we need to, which can be really helpful if we're trying to get around big recliners, lazy boys, things like that in the home, or if we need to just have the base wider to get around obstructions underneath a bed, any of those things. So all you would do to make that happen is take your included red-handled tool, take out one or both of these bolts, stretch it to the size that you need, and you'll see that there are additional holes within the inner tube that you can slide these bolts back into to lock it in place. Go back through, tighten them up, and then you have the width already set. The next thing to determine is which one of these four mounting locations are going to use for a vertical tube. So you have to kind of ask the question and determine where is the user going to be positioned. If they're going to be using this and they're going to be rolling into the front of it to use it, then we can probably go with a center location very easily. If we're going to be using this in a recliner, for example, and the mount's going to be coming in from the side of the recliner, if this is my chair here and I'm coming into the side, I'm not going to want it here because as that vertical tube comes up and the device goes over, it's going to be right at the level of my client's face. So it's going to be way too close. So I might use the opposite side so that I have enough offset to allow that 2 feet of space between my user's eyes and the device itself. In this case, because this is being used here at a hospital at Brooks in Jacksonville, I'm going to put it back where they had it, which was one of these center locations. So this is the clamp that we're going to install onto this horizontal bar. Now you'll notice inside of this clamp, it should give you instructions that tell you to face this with the directions of the legs going outward. So that's exactly what we're going to do. On the bottom of this, there's a little pin. That pin lines up with one of these two center holes that we're going to choose. So in this case, we're just going to set it on top and you'll see that as you go over it, it clicks right into place. Now, you'll notice that this is going to be a little awkward, right? So I'm going to show you what I tend to do to make this a little bit easier is just start this with my fingers. I'm going to hold that piece on the bottom. This bolt already fell out because gravity is fighting against me right now. So we're going to start to tighten this up just a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the back side, just putting that in finger tight. I'll make it as tight as I can with my fingers, but you don't have to worry about it. All I'm trying to do at this point is make sure it doesn't fall out of location whenever I flip it over like this. So now I can take it, make sure that it's still engaged, take my red-handled tool, and tighten this up evenly. Now notice that there's a gap down here. On both sides, we want to try and keep that gap as even as possible because we're using the clamping force of tightening these bolts down to keep this in place. And that gap is never going to touch, so please don't try and crank it down so that these two pieces are touching. You're never going to get there, and if you do, you've probably damaged the part. So we'll flip this back over, and now we have a nice, secure, sturdy base. Our next step is to install the vertical tube. So here's our vertical tube. At the bottom of that tube, you'll notice there's a hole. That's going to line up with the coated pin right in this fastener that we just installed. So I'm simply going to rotate this until I find that pin and slide it into place. Now, with the mounting systems, if I spin this around, you'll also notice there's this little piece of tape here. You can see there's a little piece of green. That means it's seated properly. If it's up, you'll see red. That means it's not sitting all the way into the fastener. So we want to make sure that we slide it all the way down. If you're finding trouble sliding this down, make sure that the lever is loose and that it's not tight, because if it's tight, no matter how hard you push, you're not going to get that down in there. So loosen that lever up, get it into place so you see green, and then we can snug that lever back up. Okay, so now we'll spin this back around, and we have our vertical tube installed. Pretty straightforward so far. So now we get the articulating arm. So this is the part that's really, really helpful for families and caregivers once we get it dialed in, but can be a little bit confusing for people to get set up. So what we want to do is install this part into the tube here. Okay, and you'll notice that it's curved at the back, so you're essentially just lining up just like that. And it may be the first time you use it, you may have to wiggle it a few times, get it in there, get it to seat, kind of tap on it lightly to get it down in there. And then you have your articulating arm. Now, what we don't have set up right now is the tension, right? So that's one thing that we're going to adjust depending on the type of device that you have. So if you have an I-12 or an I-15, they weigh a little bit different. So we're going to have to adjust this. And the way that we do that, oh, there it is using this black Allen key that comes included with the kit. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit. Now this one is already set up for the device that's used here in the hospital, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess with that calibration completely right now. So you'll notice that I'm spinning this a lot, because when this device, that's about where it tops out. That's normally how this mounting system shows up out of the box, is it's completely topped or very close to one end of the spectrum as far as the tension is concerned. So what we want to do is take our device holder and actually get the device installed on the mounting system so we can adjust the tension. So I'm going to install my device holder onto the tube, snug it up, and then I'm going to grab my device and I'm going to install it onto the mount. Now notice when I do this, I'm ensuring both sides are engaged and that the device is secure before I ever let it go. Do not trust just the sound of that safety pin clicking over the edge. I've had a couple people watch one side of this, and if you can see, I'm not engaged on this side, but as I clip through, you hear that safety pin engage. If you're not paying attention, you let this go, there goes your device. So we want to make sure that this is engaged, check it, and now we can kind of rotate that out of our way, and we're going to work on adjusting the tension. So right now, with the tension off, if I push this down and that's the position I want it in, our ultimate goal is for the mount to keep the device there. Right now my tension's off. It's going to keep pushing. No matter what I do, it's going to keep lifting up. So what I need to do is take my Allen key and I need to start going in this clockwise direction. Now I'm counting about 11 to 12 rotations, and now it's staying where I want it. But I want to check, do I have my tension adjusted at all locations, or does it fight me? If I'm overly tensioned, I'll hit a certain point. Well, I must be pretty good. I'll hit a certain point where, there it goes, where it doesn't want to stay in location. It'll kind of creep up on me or it'll drop down. So you're going to come back in and you're going to tighten it either to the left or to the right, I guess loosen it or tighten it to the left or the right, to adjust that final tension so that no matter where you move this, up or down, that mount is staying exactly where you want it to be. So that if you have a client who's sitting in a chair and they're at this height during maybe a therapy session, we can adjust that just like this, make our fine-tune adjustment with the ball joint, and we're up and running. But if they happen to go home and they're using it in their bed, they may need to raise this up, adjust the angle downward, but we want that mounting system to support them and to make it easy for the caregiver. A couple words of caution with this particular mount is we want to always make sure that the device stays over a stable base. So right now you can see we have our U-shaped base and the device has always stayed in between there. With this mounting system, you do have the ability to rotate this device outside of the stable base. Now, it's going to remain fairly stable, but it's also a potential tip hazard at this point. So you can see that if we were moving this, this could easily start to rotate the opposite direction. And with everything else in physics, the longer our levers are, the easier it is for things to tip. So if you're using the extension on this tube, and you're letting this go all the way up, and you rotate this device outside of that base now, it becomes much easier for this device to potentially tip. And that's what we want to avoid. We always want you guys to be safe. So be cautious. Make sure you're always working over top of a stable base. I'm going to loosen this up, bring this back down a little bit. And that's it, guys. So if you have any questions on how to assemble a mounting system, or if you have any questions about this type of mounting system, please feel free to call us at 1-800-344-1778. Thanks.